Hi, it's Sean, and you're listening to The 3-Month Vacation. I know we covered a vacation just recently, but I was slow and tardy on that, so we finished another one in between, and this is about India. Let's take a trip to that fascinating land that I originally came from. Booking at 2 hotels for the same night seems like a mistake, but there was no error. It was just an escape. On most of our trips, we look for peaceful destinations, peaceful locations, sometimes 2 to 3 hours away from crowded, polluted, and Instagram-infested cities. Yet somehow, we ended up in the middle of nowhere. We had nothing to do except have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and we were booked at this hotel for a whole week. Partly, this was a problem of our own making. When we travel, we avoid the cities as far as we can. You'd understand how we make our travel choices if you were to think of a saucer. When most people land in a place, they land in the center, which is the big city. That, to us, is the middle of the saucer. That's where you're likely to find the most activity, the most touristy things to do, the most monuments to see, and our travel is more around the rim of the saucer. We locate a place that's about 2 hours, which is about 100 to 150 kilometers away, and then we start moving around the circumference of the saucer. We only return to the city when we need to catch a flight. And this decision works for us most of the time, but at least for part of the trip, we were in a mess. And it was because of this saucer concept. Because the place that we were stranded was called Vijayaniwas Palace. Vijayaniwas might have billed itself as a palace. That's probably a dodgy term. It had a palace-like look, but it was relatively small, if it were a palace. When we were first given our upgraded room, I was slightly taken aback by the strong odor. We walked in, and there was a rather pungent smell. Typically, Renuka gets fussy with any kind of odor. However, she seemed okay with the scent on this occasion, so I went along quietly. However, the bathroom infuriated her. Once we'd settled in, she decided to take a shower, and when she was done, she complained loudly about the bathroom. I didn't pay any attention. I thought she was just complaining. But later on, I went to have a shower myself, and I found the entire bathroom was flooded with water. That water had started spilling onto the balcony. This was not just a tiny grouse by Renuka, but a problem in the hotel that called itself a palace. There were other issues as well. Despite having several rooms in the suite, one of the rooms was just like a passage to the bedroom. The other rooms were storage rooms, but the cupboards wouldn't open, so there was nowhere to hang our clothes. If some of the drawers did open, they were musty, and there was no way we would put our clothes in there. The plug points hadn't been upgraded since 1970. For some reason, the owner seemed very proud of the plug points because they looked so old. However, the real issue was that you couldn't plug anything into the wall. If you wanted to charge your phone or any device, the plugs kept falling out. Finally, we managed to work around. We got everything charged, but it was a completely unnecessary nuisance. The owners were utterly clueless. They are a youngish couple, and the property has been handed down to them by their parents. It's not like they were flashy in any way, but they seemed oblivious to the fact that things were falling apart. They seemed to treat the property like a heritage home, and when things fell apart, they considered it to be part of the experience. But there was a bigger problem. There was also nothing to do. When we looked at the property, it mentioned that there were lots of villages, about 200 villages around the place. And my big focus is to get into the countryside, to visit villages, to see what people are doing, to look at the culture, the history, the geology. That's what my holiday is about. Not too stressful, no monuments, just looking at life as it unfolds. And this place was quite in the middle of nowhere. And that was troublesome. So we had started to plan our escape. There was one problem. We'd already paid in advance in the place that we were staying, in this palace. And if we wanted to move, we'd have to pay for the remaining 2 days at another hotel. In effect, we'd be paying for 2 hotel rooms simultaneously. Do you think this decision sounds weird? Yes, it is bizarre. However, over the decades, we've learned to cut losses. And we cut losses wherever possible. And we do this because we learned from our mistakes. Many years ago, we stayed for a whole week in Denmark in a place that smelt moldy. And, of course, we'd paid for it, so we stayed there. And over the years, we've made many mistakes like this. We've paid for something, it's been treated like sunk costs, and we think, well, we've already put our money down. But no longer. It's not a life is short. There's plenty of time. But if you're in a trap, and you can escape that trap, what's the point in staying where you are? The only problem was that it wasn't easy to leave. The couple that ran our place sensed our frustration, so they were eager for us to stay. And there was this one incident just before we left. They told us they would like to share a dinner with us, and first we would just have to go to the temple with them. Nothing happened at the temple. But after that, we were going to join them, or rather they were going to join us, for a local specialty dish called dal batti. Since they were making an effort, and we'd never had this local Rajasthani dish, we decided to play along. Plus, it was a dinner invitation. They said they were joining us, so there was no reason to be rude. But there was a surprise waiting for us on the following day. Renuka always checks her bills, especially dinner bills, and then signs them off. Imagine our surprise when we were billed for the previous night's meal. To us, the way the meal was presented seemed like an invitation. We were sitting with them. We were eating something that we hadn't ordered. It seemed like they were trying to fix things a bit. But when we saw the bill, we knew that wasn't the case. What made it a little worse was that we tend to have one dish for dinner. Remember, we're traveling. We have to have 3 meals a day. We have to have 3 meals a day. And over a month, that's 90 meals. So we're very careful with our food when we travel. And we generally have one dish, and we split it among the 2 of us. We thought it was a little crass that they charged us for the dinner. But for 2 dishes, that was over the top. But there's more. It's just a peasant dish made of wheat and dal. But the price, it was higher than anything else on the menu, which was a bit convenient because the dish was not on the menu. Could we have made a fuss about it? Yes, of course. But it's just an experience to learn from. When we were done with this palace, it was time to move on to the next venue, which, as it turned out, was way more than just a palace. Our average experience at one place, our frustration at one place, had led us to discover a gem of a hotel in Rajasthan. However, there were still surprises, as we'd find out the following day. In the very south of India, in the city of Cochin, is the town of Chittoor. Over 300 years ago, the Maharaja of Cochin needed a royal residence, which was close to this temple of Chittoor, which is why the historic royal residence was constructed. The palace fell into decay several centuries later until one person stepped in. That person was Lady Helen Hamlin. She's a British philanthropist, an arts patron, and she has actively restored structures worldwide. She's used her money to restore places in France, in Portugal, and several in India. One of them was Chittoor Kottaram, the place that we were staying in. But Lady Hamlin is not the only person doing these restoration projects. This new hotel that we'd moved in, this wonderful fort, it was also a restoration project. A local woman, Lekha Poddar, and her son, they had worked on the restoration of this 18th century fort. There are hundreds, probably thousands of forts in India. But this magnificent home was in ruins, crumbling walls, fallen ceilings, and many rooms were open to the sky. Monkeys and birds had made it their home. The fort needed about 15 years of restoration, and 750 workers completed a large portion of the work in about 6 years. It is spread over several acres, but it has only 39 rooms. And like all of the other palaces we'd been to, it was peaceful and quiet. However, the peace lasted for just one day. After breakfast, I opened up my diary and my watercolor set, and I started painting. So I was in the restaurant upstairs when someone from the hotel's front desk showed up with some urgency. Earlier that morning, that person had taken me on a tour that had lasted well over an hour. He had very proudly described many of the suites within the palace. But now, as he was standing in front of me, his voice was not calm. He requested me to move to another, superior suite. Choose the suite you'd like, and we can move your luggage right across. Since he had already shown me several rooms, he thought I'd be able to make a quick choice. However, I wanted Renuka to decide which room she would prefer. But Renuka likes her sleep, and it was coming on to siesta time. So I assumed that she'd be fast asleep. My phone lit up minutes later, and Renuka was on the line. "We have to move rooms now," she said. I could barely figure out what was happening, and the next thing I know, the hotel's general manager showed up, and he was keen that we upgraded our room immediately. Only then did I figure out what was unfolding. A group of people from the bordering state had shown up, armed with boxes of snacks and cartons of beer, and they had booked 10 rooms. They were so loud, and they didn't bother to tone down their volume even a tiny bit. Plus, they were trampling all around the property, playing cricket, shouting, and generally making a nuisance of themselves. The hotel was highly proactive in its decision-making. They isolated the noisemakers to one part of the property and moved us to the royal suites. We were happy in our existing room, but thanks to this nuisance factor, we got a room that was one of the finest ones in the hotel. How do I know? I did the room tour earlier, remember? We were extremely pleased with the way things had turned out. However, sadly, we had to move on. It was time to go to the southwest of India, to Goa. For most tourists, Goa is a wonderful place. Compared with the intensely hectic nature of most Indian cities, Goa has a feeling that's hard to describe. Though the major religion of Goa is Hindu, 66%, it looks very Catholic, with almost 150 churches and hundreds of chapels. And you have thousands of villas, old Portuguese villas that dot the landscape. You add an almost endless array of beaches and mouth-watering foods, and you have a partly good idea why it has become a place of refuge, seemingly forever. That's the Goa I knew as a child, and not the Goa of today. My parents, and now the rest of my family, live in Goa, so I make the journey more out of duty than delight. And yet, I was pleasantly surprised when we got to our boutique hotel. The streets were empty, they were quiet, and they were all around us. And there was forest and birdsong. I couldn't believe it. It felt like I'd gone back in time. And then the hot weather stepped in. It was early March, and the temperatures were already hovering at 5 degrees more than usual. This heat was 37 degrees centigrade and was matched by intense humidity, so much so that you felt like it was 47 degrees centigrade. I'm fine in extreme cold, and heat, well, it's bad, but I don't care that much. Renuka, on the other hand, can't handle either. Within hours of our arrival, Renuka's head and eyes began to swell, but the next day she was ill. It wasn't just her that was feeling this way. Many locals were not used to this soaring heat this early in the year, and were often much worse. But then it was my turn. Whatever bug Renuka had picked up was now also my problem. The car that we had rented for 5 days sat forlornly in the courtyard, and we spent most of our time in the room, not feeling well, vomiting, and this hasn't been the case when we've visited Goa before. And so we did this entire circle. We went to Rajasthan, to this place that seemed like a palace but wasn't, which then took us to this glorious fort where we enjoyed ourselves. We even played Holi. We got color all over ourselves. And that's the first time I ever did it, which is surprising because I grew up in India and I've never done it before. So it was the first time for me. There are photos as well. And finally, we got back in time to Goa. I got back in time. It was the Goa that I knew. In fact, if my parents weren't living there, I'd probably have skipped Goa completely. But this time, the hotel, the environment around it, it changed my mind. It made me want to go back, even if I needed a little coolness, some cooler months. People go on holiday for adventure and sightseeing, but we go on vacation to do nothing. And yet, the adventure tags along anyway. And that's what I love about holidays. If everything goes your way, then your holiday stories are boring. We stayed in this great hotel. Look at all this fancy stuff. It's like an Instagram world. It's fake. It's not real. It's not what I want, at least. Not what we want. But when things bounce a bit, then you can still have a great time. And the memory of those crazy bits stay with you forever. So much so that I can't wait to pack my cameras and to go back to that crazy land of India. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. Let's find out what's happening in Psychotactics land. Well, the big news is that Suddenly Talented, the book, is available in paperback. And it's available in paperback on Amazon.com. So go to Amazon.com. I was about to say go to Psychotactics.com, but go to Amazon.com and look for Suddenly Talented. And there it is, the paperback. There's also the Kindle version and very soon the audio version. You can also get a separate package on our website. So if you want to buy directly from our website, you can do that at psychotactics.com/talent. But if you just want the joy of reading on paper, then go to Amazon.com and look for Suddenly Talented. And that's it from me. I'll say bye for now. Bye-bye. When we were in Rajasthan, I was taking photographs with my Leica. That's the name of my camera. And I would send them to my friend Herman, who lives in Germany, in Frankfurt. Well, at some point in time, Herman wrote back to me and said, I would like some details. Now, I didn't understand what he said, or rather, I misunderstood what he said. And he wanted me to zoom in or to take more details of the places I was seeing in the photographs. I didn't realize that. I thought he wanted more details, like as if they were captions. So I started digging. I looked at the geology of the place, the history, the culture. I started reading and asking loads of questions, hanging around people for several hours at a time, because you know what it is. We go nowhere. And this whole crazy world started to unfold. I would use the word unravel, but it sounds crazy. It sounds like something went wrong. No. I realized that all of my travels, as slow and non-activity based that they had been before, were not quite the same as this time. And when I came back, I was speaking to my cousin who lives in the US, and we were talking about how when we were young, I used to go to her grandfather's house and read National Geographic. And people have been mentioning that I should post, or I should send my photos to National Geographic. They've never said that before, but after this trip, this is what almost everybody has been saying. And it's really hard to get in touch with people and convince them that they should use your photos. At which point I decided, well, maybe I'll do my own magazine. So watch this space. It's a pretty big venture. It's a crazy venture, but it might be a magazine. Not a magazine about travel, no hotels, no locations, no planes, trains, nothing of that sort, but an autobiography of places. How the geology and history and culture is connected, and often not just now, but over the centuries. I'm excited about it, and being excited about it means it's a lot of hard work. So we'll see how this unfolds. But for now, go to Amazon.com and get your copy of Suddenly Talented. I'll say bye for now, and we'll go back to our regular non-travel stories. Bye for now.